Check out this amazing review from this amazing student who was delighted with her CELPIP preparation with HZad, and if you haven't gotten a taste of that, you're going to get some today. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so, because today we're going to start with an important lesson, which is your vocabulary. And I don't have just any vocab list. I have something that is really, really neat and organized to actually help you practically in your exam. What I have, guys, today is a list, not only one list, but a list of connectors, a list of contradictors, and more lists down the road. I have 10 lists for you. Each list has 5 words. I want you to have 5 words for each type of situation that you will face in CELPIP writing and speaking, and these are only 5 words per list, which means you can actually use them and implement them without any excuses. Let's get started with the first list. Top connectors, and I mean the best ones, the academic ones that you can use very easily. So whenever you're connecting points, instead of saying and, or worse, not saying anything at all, use things like furthermore, moreover, likewise, in addition, consequently. Now you see the first 3 are easy to use. They can be used in any case placed whenever you're starting points, but you should also mix them up with a 2-worded connector and with a connector with a li, like consequently, it's an adverb, and using a combination helps you get your marks for your range. I got a reward for you. Since you're following me on YouTube, I'm giving out our highest discounted coupon code to only our YouTube viewers. All you gotta do is email me. Email is in the description. Subject line, YouTube discount, and I'll send you personally a high discount code that you can use for a CELPIP self-paced course, which is the best-selling course on the planet with thousands of successful students, and now you get to save more than anyone else. Email me now and get this offer. Now the second list is with contradictors many times. CELPIP speaking part 5, CELPIP writing part 2. You're contradicting. You have 2 different pieces of information, or you're having some sort of debate. When you are contradicting and you say but or however, you sound extremely basic. Instead, use words like nevertheless, nonetheless. Change it up with more range, 3-worded connector, on the contrary. Even though this point presents many advantages, the cons were numerous. Something like that, and even though usually goes at the start of sentences, just like how I used it to express 2 different situations or things. Finally, whereas this does this, whereas this does this, comparing 2 different things. The third list we have is using words that are very common, and you want to find advanced alternatives for them. For example, we use something like very important. We should say crucial. When we say help, we should say facilitate, show, demonstrate, think, consider, get, obtain, and I can go on. There are a lot of words that I can place in this list, but for the sake of keeping it short, I wanted to use this as an example. Basically, this is something you want to practice at home. Whenever you are writing or speaking and you record your speaking, you proofread your writing, type these words out on something like thesaurus.com, and you will see the advanced words that could replace your basic words. A key thing you want to try constantly at home is to do exactly this. Replace the most commonly used words with the advanced alternatives. List number 4 is our concluders. Very important, not only for the final paragraph or the final sentence, it's also important when you're finishing the sub-points. For example, one answer could have 3 or 4 points. At the end of each point, or at least in some of those points, you should know what to use. Now, some connectors you can use here are to sum up, in conclusion, flows nicely off the tongue, all things considered, unique and advanced, ultimately, an adverb, and it's really nice when you're summing up the whole thing. Similarly, overall is the most fitting thing when you're doing the final sentence or a conclusion if it is writing. Now let's talk about comparison words. These are different from contradictory words that we looked at earlier. Comparison words could be for points that are similar as well. They don't have to be opposing each other. For example, you're talking about one advantage. Going to the next advantage, you can say something like similarly, another pro is this. But if it is comparison, if it's something different, for example, it is ideal for part 5 CELPIP speaking to use something like in comparison when you're comparing two different points. This is what you have in your picture. In comparison, this is the benefit I have. Likewise, just as you have this, I believe we should also consider this. Correspondingly, so your options provide these benefits. Correspondingly, my options provide us these benefits. And this is very useful whenever you're comparing those two different things or points or factors. When we talk about sequences, we know firstly, secondly, thirdly, no big surprises, very handy, very quick to use, especially in speaking. Subsequently is more advanced. It's something that is happening next. This happens, subsequently, this other thing is what happens. Meanwhile, afterwards, finally, and finally is perfect for the ending. So again, very useful words when you are going towards the conclusion or just in between points, jumping from one to the next, because very often we say and or next. And beyond this, we don't have more vocab. So use a combination of the words on your screen. List number 9 is to do with examples, and everybody says, for instance, for example, let me give you a few more elements here to illustrate. Such as, when you're giving examples, there are many benefits to this, such as, and also you can say, namely. There are many benefits to this, namely, the benefit of this is the most pronounced or prominent, and so on. So there are more variations than just for instance and for example, and 5 are just enough because you wouldn't be really doing more than 5 per answer. The final list is of our formal tone boosters. Predominantly, which means significantly or mainly. Consequently, and again, these are not things that are going to be used in the same way. Predominantly is when you're highlighting one very important thing. Consequently is the next thing, the next step. Notably is something that you want the person to notice. Substantially is something that is very important. The price here is substantially higher than it was last year. Evidently is when you're making a point. Evidently, this will lead to an increase in prices or income or whatever. Evidently is more like obviously or clearly. And why do we have these 5 different words here? Because these are things that are formal tone boosters, which is a fancy term for emphasis. However, the formal emphasis is done slightly differently than informal emphasis. We saw the informal emphasis up top. However, here we have things that would go in formal explanations, speaking answers, and especially that task 1 formal email where you have to emphasize. These words would be ideal for those scenarios. And with that said, this wraps up our list of vocab, 50 top words organized in our top CELPIP vocab list. If you liked this lesson and found it valuable, please like, share, and subscribe. We'll talk soon. Take care.